Good afternoon. It's Wednesday the 14th of February and I've just got home from completing the 7th of 53 consecutive 5-mile walks from the Gresford Disaster Memorial to the Miners Rescue Station and back again. And after a week of walking, the following's been achieved. 67,284 steps, 35 miles, 11.3 hours and a handsome £945 donated to the Miners Rescue. So a massive thank you to everybody who's made a contribution. That leaves a mere 416,000 steps, 231 miles and 74 hours to complete. The mood might not be as good next week. Following on from yesterday's film and the intolerable conditions, back-breaking work and measly wages afforded the miners, it might be reasonable to ask, why did they put up with it? Sadly, they had no or little choice. The Wall Street crash precipitated a global depression that saw the demand for goods and raw materials fall away. Men were laid off, factories closed, and overseas trade almost ceased entirely. Added to this, World War I reparations resulted in Germany providing coal to Britain and other European nations, and this badly damaged our export markets. Coal mining as an industry had the third highest levels of unemployment in Britain, causing depression in areas such as Wrexham, where there were coal fields. As these areas had focused almost exclusively on coal mining, there was very little alternative employment. And when the Labour government of 1931 introduced production quotas as an alternative to pit closures, mines knew what they could produce, and given that it was a reduced quantity, men lost their jobs. 400 from Gresford, 600 from neighbouring Cly, Maine, and they had no option other than to accept reduced hours. In the words of Beverley Tinson, author of the Gresford Letters, this caused untold hardship and suffering, for a man had to work less than 3 days a week to qualify for unemployment payments. Ithell Kelly, the last acting manager at Gresford before it closed, described how his father in 1934 would bring home a mere 14 shillings a week. There were 11 of us children. 10 shillings was the rent money. I can't begin to tell you how hard it was for the families. The deprivation was enormous, and although the conditions in Gresford were extremely difficult, people would be reluctant to pack up that, as there were no other jobs. Unemployment stood at 41% in the Wrexham area. Socially, the majority of working people were a very deprived class. Tomorrow our focus shifts to the actual disaster itself, and the significance of the footage you're watching right now will become apparent. And so this marks the end of the introduction to the Gresford disaster, where we've looked at the Gresford Memorial and the site of the colliery and how that's changed over time, the other tragedies in local mines, the fateful decision to work double shifts to get to the Wrexham Tranmere game, the old spoil heap that exists in Pandy today, the North Wales coalfield and the sinking of the Denison Martin shafts, the development of Garden Village, the various roles performed by the miners, the devastating underground conditions, and the economic hardships faced by mining communities in the 1930s. This walk was dedicated to John Collins, Thomas R. Cornwell, William Crump, Thomas Darlington, and Arthur Davis.